there, and welcome to Labour Media. The UK is having a bit of a political predicament at the moment. Last time I spoke here, we had a completely different Prime Minister to the one we have now, but we very much have a similar economic crisis as we did then being 2 weeks ago. Now with 3 PMs in the space of 3 months, the Blairite ilk and the Social Democrats, or Democratic Socialists quote-unquote, of the country are both clamouring for a general election. Many of these people want to vote Labour, tactically or genuinely, just to get the Tories out. Whilst Labour's actual policy is a bit scarce and their adherents seem to be more concerned with beating the Tories rather than questioning whether their beloved Labour Party might be on the same side as the Conservatives, one thing these people do want to push for is proportional representation. If you're even slightly interested in British politics or have ever taken an A-level politics class, you've probably heard the term. The voting system and the structure of our democracy, again quote-unquote, is a conventional topic within the centrist fold. But why? What is proportional representation, and why do many think it's going to be some heralded saviour that resurrects our politics? Today we're going to take a diversion from Marxism proper, and we're going to look into this system and why its lone installation will not save us all. This part will sound a bit electoralist, but we need the backstory, so hang tight, we'll get some analysis later. Now, if you're from one of a good many countries over the world, you probably already have proportional representation, or some form of it. However, in the UK, we hold our general elections with a first-past-the-post system. Essentially, there's 650 constituencies in the UK. In each constituency, a number of candidates stand, of whom you can only vote for one. The candidate with the most votes wins and gets that seat, adding it to the party's total in Parliament, if they're in a political party, which the vast majority are. Note that by the most, I don't mean the popular vote of the constituency, I just mean a plurality of votes, more than any other individual candidate, meaning the winner frequently loses the popular vote in their constituency. This is not a democratic system by any stretch of the word. Your vote could literally matter less depending on how safe your constituency is as a seat, and candidates don't even need to win over a majority of votes. Proportional representation seeks to rectify this. A system that relies on having political parties, proportional representation turns votes directly into seats. In the last election, about 32 million people voted. Considering there are 650 seats in Parliament, under PR, if a party would have gotten about 49,230 votes, they'd get a seat. Rather than a set of isolated local races, a party's national vote is divided by that number. So Labour's 10,269,051 votes in the last election would have gotten them 209 seats under this system, rather than the 202 they actually got. On screen now are the adjusted totals for the major parties under PR. This more proportional system favours small parties a lot, whose support base is vastly divided. This is what the proponents of PR favour so much about the system. Voting for small parties is viable rather than an opportunity cost against an adjacent party. Big parties have to fight harder for votes, and it is more democratic. I'm making air quotes if you can't tell. So we're going to see just how much more democratic this system actually is. CGP great video script aside, now you know about proportional representation, probably doesn't sound too bad. How useful is it actually? For that, we're going to have to analyse deeper. Before we pursue the fine print of proportional representation, we must look at whether it even has a chance of getting pursued. We'll talk more about why this is a reformist position, and certainly not one taken by any Marxists I know of in a second, but for now, just know that it is a reformist position, and so how do these reformists wish to achieve proportional representation? As with most reformist ideas, they can only see it being achieved via voting, which is why many have staked their hopes on the Labour Party after they promised to bring in PR at their party conference. Not the leadership, though, as Keir Starmer has said that the idea is not really a priority at the moment. Even if, though, by some miracle PR gets in Labour's next manifesto, there is no guarantee. Starmer has already turned on all of his previous pledges from the leadership election. We need to take a step back and think about this. Keir Starmer is supposedly going to hearken in, sweeping political fraud. The man whose plan for economic revitalisation consists entirely of a post-it note that lists the points war, with a little smiley face next to it, bought British, written in capitals and underlined twice with an exclamation point at the end, and the meekly written third point, taxes, ? Jokes aside, if reformists would be willing to organise a movement to force the hand of the incumbent government to instate PR, then it is hypothetically possible. However, if we look at the failings of PR, we'll see that such a goal is certainly not the best use of such resources. Proportional representation is not a new idea. In fact, it's pretty standard. It exists a great deal in South America and Europe, as well as in parts of Africa and Asia. However, what has it actually achieved? Let's look at Germany, one of the most powerful nations in the world, and essentially the ringleader of Western Europe. They had a national election in 2021, which ended in a coalition government occupied by the SDP, the FDP, and the Greens, essentially a social democratic, highly moderate coalition. Opponents of PR may hold this up as a success, with small parties being able to get into government. However, what has this government achieved? The parties involved are, as a broad consensus, the numerous cost of living protests and the colonial actions of Western Europe that Germany leads demonstrate how they remain staunchly neoliberal. Despite the meagre promises of reform, Germany stays chugging along. Capitalism continues forward, monopolies grow larger, profits go higher, material conditions worsen, imperialism continues, and the world also continues to burn. Where's a notable change following the handover from CSU-CDU to the Social Democratic bloc? The situation is worse in other parts of Europe. In Sweden, the fascistic Swedish Democrats have been able to gain a great deal of power in the last election. Despite the myriad more democratic, once again, air quotes, systems of Europe, they all seem to be pursuing the same line as the UK. This is not to defend first past the post, but is to point out that the implementation has not led to better governance. It has not led to substantially different results. Why is this? Surely PR should lead to the nucleus of power fundamentally shifting now the people need not vote tactically. It's because the nucleus of power is not wholly accessed by the vote. These countries remain dictatorships of the bourgeoisie. Their governments do not work for the people, but instead work for the capitalist class who have these parties bought and sold. This isn't a blanket don't vote message, but rather a statement that we cannot rely on these elections to deliver us salvation. We cannot expect to single-handedly escape the decline of living standards domestically and globally via the proportional election of our oppressors. Voting can be useful, but a voting system offered under a bourgeois system shouldn't be expected to deliver us from the oppression of the bourgeois in one fell swoop. Let's consider why liberals fall into the trap of thinking that proportional representation will single-handedly save us all. Liberals broadly believe that democracy is when there is a plurality of parties. That sounds like a joke, but just ask any liberal who will, rightly, mock and scorn the Conservative Party. If you suggest that the Conservative Party should be banned, if you suggest that the party they've figured out is actively hateful of a myriad groups and is an active butcher of the earth, should not be allowed to continue gaining power, they will chastise how authoritarian you are. We see this in the US too, where Democrats and Democrat voters will advocate for a strong Republican Party, despite attacking said party, again rightly so, at every turn. Liberals truly believe that the more parties there are, the more democracy there is. However, this is simply not so, as even in systems where third parties are more viable, these parties still fall into ideological camps. In the German Bundestag, there are not a wealth of political positions, but rather two positions, each with their own factions. Now the imperial court is entirely taken by neoliberalism, these two positions themselves have started to look more and more alike, and those positions have become more and more united. For instance, in the UK, though third parties are less powerful, they still mirror the trend of ideological homogeneity. Every major party in the UK is a neoliberal party, and the difference between the Liberal Democrats, Labour and the Greens is broadly unnoticeable. The gap between these three and the Conservatives has also decreased dramatically. Sure, they'll attack and mock each other, but do not be fooled into thinking that there is no performance at play. The two are agreed on most elements of economics, all elements of foreign policy, and increasingly so on social policy, as Labour descends deeper into reactionism with each passing day. Indeed, despite the multitude of parties elsewhere in Europe, this same homogeneity persists. Macron's moderates increasingly take on the fascistic rhetoric of Le Pen, and indeed the fascistic policy. Germany, as we discussed, has not seen social democracy rescue it from economic crisis, nor has it seen a shift in foreign policy. Even the proudly socialist parties of Scandinavia are backpedaling alongside their social democratic brethren. The many different voting systems of bourgeois democracy, including proportional representation, have not led to a sufficient difference in the ability of the people to vote for their own betterment. Proportional representation is a wolf in sheep's clothing. It looks good on paper, sounds good in practice, but a deeper look at the system reveals that it's a bourgeois facade. No system, be it first past the post, alternative vote, single transferable vote, or proportional representation, will single-handedly allow for an election wherein the bourgeoisie willingly gives up their power. Such efforts have ended in the fashion of those in Chile or Guatemala, slain by a US coup and replaced by a fascist dictatorship. Voting isn't useless, but by no means should it be relied upon. There is much to do in regards to building a people's movement in Britain. We cannot get carried away with trying to vote our problems away. Thank you for watching. I swear, every time I get to record these, the fucking phlegm build up in my throat, it spawns. I get like a mini cold at the moments when I'm recording. It's absolutely amazing. Wow. There's some stuff in the description, mainly the transcript. That's the main thing, big thing. Yes. So I hope you enjoyed this thingy bob. I've seen too many fucking liberals go on about how much they fucking we need proportional representation. We need it. That's the only thing that can stop us from falling into tyranny. Oh boy. Motherfucker, you live in fucking tyranny or fucking always has been. Right, people honestly think that I think A-level politics has corrupted the youth. I think people there's too much of these people. It's not good. It's not good. So I do plan to eventually, at some point, do a video on democratic centralism, which I think is the preferable voting system. Well, not voting, well, electoral system, I suppose. Really voting system, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, I'll also go over like what I would imagine how I, in an ideal. Oh, Ella, the microphone's fallen off. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. I will also go over how I imagine like an ideal version of that would go in like an ideal circumstance, of course. Yeah, is that everything? Who am I? Once again, there is no one else here. Yes, this has been Labour Media, and remember, Labour conquers all.